So you had this morning, you heard from some parents and caregivers, you heard about diagnosis. The one thing I wanted to add about lifelong supports is the issue of transitions. We all need to be aware of the transitions that the support a person needs making the transitions in life. In one major transition, and there's many, but one major one is the transition from being a teenager to being an adult. So to start things off, I'm going to ask Reinier to come up, but he's a man of much wisdom and great experience.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to switch over this neck device. Hang on. I need my hands to communicate, and it just helps a lot. So, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Don. First thing I want to say, yeah, this is my first official legal gig. But I assure you I'm talking on a topic that I know fairly well, and that's me. And the 30, 40 years of therapy, I can tell you I know myself quite well. Good or bad news. So, because we'll talk about memory issues in a minute, but I use my computer to help my brain know where I'm going. Otherwise, you guys are going to get a lot of really neat stories that go nowhere. Unlike my good friend Jeff Noble, who knows how to keep that together, which I think he did a great job yesterday. And I continue to learn about myself, strangely, from outside myself. So that's another neat thing that happens. I really want to disclaim here a little bit, which is I'm speaking from my experience. So if you know someone on the spectrum, if you are on the spectrum, this is my experience. It may not be yours. And that's a great topic to sit down somewhere and have a discussion someday about the differences. But so this is my experience, and I don't always get the words right. I try to be PC as possible, but I don't like it to get in the way of what my heart wants to tell you. So please understand I'm coming from my heart in all this stuff. And one thing I want to talk about that's really important if you are on the spectrum anywhere, and even some of the adults I've spoken to will usually attest to this, is this thing called the imposter syndrome. So that's that thing that even though you've got your act together, you just feel, man, am I a mess. So that's where I am right now. Part of me is telling me I should be standing on the stage, and I will use this neat French word that I learned once, fuck it. So I'm here anyway. But I do need to disclaim that if I seem a bit nervous, it's only because I'm a little nervous, okay? So how did this come about that I, at 56 years old, found out that I was on the FASD spectrum? And I'll explain later why I was really happy about that. I am a multimedia artist. My name is Reinier. My first name is Scott. So Scott Reinier deSmit, and at about 40 years old, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm unemployable. I'm going to be self-employed the rest of my life as an artist. And I thought Reinier was a much cooler name. So no offense to any Scots out there, but I switched it over. And so I was editing videos for Queen's Neuroscience in Kingston. And I've also worked with Bonnie and Colette from the Broken or Damaged Angels. And some really neat people we were interviewing and stuff. And I'm editing their lives, and I'm going, wow, this seems awfully close to the bone. And I was talking with my producer, who we worked on about 3 or 4 videos, Sioux, and she listened to me over the number of months we were working together, and she kind of said, dude, you might want to just think about a diagnosis. Now at the time, again, this was about 2015-ish, 2014, there wasn't a lot of stuff for adults. It was really tricky as an adult thinking you might be on the spectrum to get a diagnosis. Long story short, it took me 3 years to go through the process, gave up a few times, decided to keep going. And I was invited to a seminar, very much like this one, a one-day one in Kingston. And I sat at one of these little tables like you guys are doing. And They handed out this sheet at one point. Some of you may have seen this, and you don't need to see it right now, but it basically has 39 behaviors of FASD against the grid of OCD and bipolar and autism and all the other fun things that we humans can get blessed with. I hit 33 of them. And at that point, it was like, I'm going to get a diagnosis one way or the other. I needed to know. Now, the funny thing is, when I circled those 33 little circles on this behavioral list, one of the doctors came by. I can't remember who she was, but classic psychologist. Oh, Ray, that's a lot of red X's on that sheet. How do you feel about that? So here's the truth. I looked up at her and I just said, and I said it from my heart. Oh my God. Like, this is a blessing. I'm looking at not how I'm broken, but how I'm built. This is a huge thing. For me, it was a huge stepping point. Because up until that point, for 55, 54 years of my life at that point, I felt broken. When you see that they're flying with broken wings and all these, damaged angels, all this, there is a real element of feeling like damaged goods. You either will feel victimized and other people are keeping you down, or you'll just feel like, oh, even worse, I'm keeping myself down. So this diagnosis basically went, I'm looking at what has affected my brain to be just the way it is. So that's an important thing I want to mention here too, that whenever you're dealing with anybody on the spectrum, I really recommend, my recommendation, maybe nobody else, but I recommend you yourself and to your charges that you direct them to speak from empowerment and enlightenment information and not to speak from victimhood. So this is really important. I think it's really easy. Believe me, I have felt really smashed, trashed, crushed, all these things. It didn't help me to feel those things. It just made my life hell, or more hellish. So what really shifted in me was looking at this as, oh my God, there's a roadmap to understand what is happening. And I think one thing that helps us get out of suffering, gets us out of the problem of being on a spectrum, is to go, I'm on a spectrum, versus, I'm on a spectrum. Now, it is a spectrum. So I'm blessed. I will say this too. I was blessed. I didn't get it until I was 50. I was blessed with a fairly smart cognitive brain in the sense that I was sharp. That's how I was actually able to hide for like 30 years of my adult life, maybe 40 years of my life. I knew how, out of those 33 behaviors that I hit, beside those red X's, there were about 25 little green circles. One of my friends said, what are those? I said, that's where I learned to hide those things. That's where I learned to get around those things. Right now, in this moment, I am running at about 40 to 50% speed. I've learned to speak at this pace. In my head, I'm talking like this. But I've gotten used to the speed. So this is another important thing. Not being in that state of victimhood gave me the power of going, this is what is. I'd like to be that. How do I get there? And owning the path. So that's something I really invite you caregivers, service providers, find that way to invite your charges at whatever level they're at, slowly towards self-responsibility in a compassionate way. Because it really does change the game once that little part clicks in. Does that make sense? Yes. Good. So as a child, it was really funny for me. My mom, I was really blessed getting the diagnosis. One of the things, of course, had to do is deal with the mother issue. And my parents had not been very close with me for most of my life. There was a lot of discrepancies in how we thought the universe and the world should be. But at one point, I think about 20 years into therapy, we sat down one week and I kind of locked the house doors. I said, we're going to get into it. I said, we're getting into it. And I said, we're getting into it. And we did, and we cleared up a lot of things. We both kind of all took responsibility for our situation as a family. I really understood how hard it was for them to raise a kid like me. And they really got how hard it was for a kid like me to be raised by them. And that balanced things, it kind of cleared the air. So when it came time to get a diagnosis, I had to do the, did my mom drink or not? And it was weird because it didn't matter what I thought. My mom was alive, she was cognitive, she could speak for herself. And the first time I went to sit down with her, and I said, gee, Mom, so, playing it cool. I'm just wondering, when you were pregnant with me, you had a few, right? Because my mom, just to be clear, there was no alcoholism in my immediate family, because that would have been much easier to spot. But there was always booze around. And my mom said, oh, no, I didn't drink when I was pregnant with you. Oh. And I went away for a month or two, kind of thought, well, that blows that. My intuition told me to keep going. And so what happened was, we were out one day, and I think we were at Swiss Chalet, wherever you normally go with Mom. And again, I just I had this idea. I said, Mom, I remember when I was a little tyke, you guys would always have your Saturday, cribbage party with your neighborhood friends. And I always remember, I was still seeing it with martini glass shape. This remember is late 50s, early 60s. I was born in 59. So I just said to her, so I remember this part. Oh yeah. And I said, you used to always shoot me off to bed early, so that the adults could have their time. Oh yeah. And I said, I remember, you guys having martinis. Oh yeah, we loved our, that was big, cribbage and martinis. I'm like, oh, so did you enjoy your martinis and cribbage? Oh yeah. Oh, I thought you didn't drink. Oh, I drank, I wasn't a drinker. So at that point we had a really good discussion, and my process of going through all those lovely steps, which were actually exciting to me. I do therapy for sport. Now, did it first. Those steps and going through that really brought me around to this amazing place where once the diagnosis happened, I could sit in front of my mom and say, this is what happened, this is what we did, what you did, and this is the result. And my mom cried. There's a video about this online if you want to check it out. My mom's she's really cute. She cried, I cried, and it was the crying of understanding. If any of you had that with your parental units or kids or with best friends, there's a feeling in your heart that you just go, something real is happening and something is settling in my world, my life. So at this point, my mom went through, and this is important, there's lots of discussion about the moms and how they should feel and shouldn't feel, how painful it can be. But there's a part of the pain for my mom that she went, now I understand. I didn't get it. My mom was going through decades of suffering. Why am I such a crappy mom? Why can't we figure out this kid? Really short story. My brother's 7 years older than me, so he came in a little early. He was captain of the football team, head of the math class, head of the chess club. Go sit down. Yes, Mom. He was an awesome little guy. 7 years later, I came into the world, and I was a little different than my brother. But my parents by this time thought, well, we know how to raise a kid. And so they just jammed me into the same Play-Doh fun factory. And it didn't work. And they, it took me a while to realize they were doing their best. It wasn't working. So when I got this diagnosis, and I sat down with my mom, she could let a lot go. And again, I did not come from victimhood. I came from, Mom, this is what happened. This is why you and I had such a hard time. This is why Dad and I had such a hard time. So the diagnosis was so important to get clear on that, because now it's like there's a doorway opening of actual learning, growth, and in my case, really refining who I am on this spectrum. I'm not the spectrum. You've heard that 100 times. I'm not my FASD. Absolutely. Nobody hears, whatever you do, you are not that thing. But you're the one doing it. And the better you know that one doing it, the better you're going to do the thing you're doing. So the diagnosis really helped cement that relationship with my mom. Sadly, by this time, my dad had passed, but him and I were good. I think mom was the issue. Go figure. And just to talk a little bit about being an adult on the spectrum. Memory throughout school and everything was really a nightmare for me. It was actually brilliant yesterday with actually Jeff. Hi Jeff, how you doing back there?
I'm doing fine, sir, thank you.
He's awesome. So Jeff wanted me to do a short little, help him with this little promo video. So he pulls out his phone and I said, okay, I'm going to need your password. Because don't you know when everybody hands you a phone and they want you to do something, by the time you walk over to do it, it's gone blank and you need their password to do it. So I knew that. So I got it from Jeff and he said, not a real number. 2345. I went, great, okay. And then we got interrupted, someone else came in for a second. I said, okay, so that was 2543? Like, not even 30 seconds later. My brain holds that stuff like, you know, like a chicken wire holds a bucket of water. That's just so. This generated a lot of shame when I was in school. And I don't know, and RJ can speak more on this, but most people I've met on the spectrum, this is a major issue. Memory, you know, being able to repeat things accurately. School was not fun for me. That was another whole Play-Doh fun factory. Talk about, when I went to school in the 60s, this was all about control, and I wasn't very controllable. So the memory issue, there's a lot of behavioral stuff you've already heard. I went through all those as well. But it made, again, generated that feeling of being the wrong cog in the wrong machine. So again, back to you caregivers. However you can get your young ones to understand, and parents, caregivers. When I say caregivers, I say whoever you're supporting on the spectrum. If you can make those kids understand that not normal is normal, that not normal is absolutely fine. That's a really key element, because I'll tell you, it was really hard to learn and grow under this bucket load of shame and feeling stupid. When I was misdiagnosed with bipolar, 15, 20 years before I got the FASD thing, you know, I was told, yeah, you would have been labeled learning disabled and all that, you know. That label wouldn't have helped me a lot. But getting that I'm built to see things from a different perspective, it makes me a good artist. Let me say there's some blessings. Some may say this is a hellish thing, I got an FASD, and it absolutely is for some. And I say mostly through more ignorant of who you are in this spectrum, the more horrible it is. But for me, there's absolutely a gift. I'm quite creative. And it's because people say, Reinier, how did you come up with that crazy idea? It's so different than your last one. It's because I can't remember my last one. I'm also a musician. I play rock and roll Tex-Mex accordion. And I'm really good. I can walk up into a jam and just, what key are you in? And I can rock and roll pretty good. And again, people will go, how do you do that? Because I don't know. I'm going anyway. So any roadmap doesn't help me. So I call this kind of my FASD superpower. There's things that FASD will do to a person that will force them not to be normal. And some will say, this is terrible. And again, it can be for some. But I want you to get the idea that not, like being literally, not being able to be in the box that everyone else is in, is a real neat gift. The world isn't, well, the problems in the world today will not be solved from the same box that we've been building all these problems with. We need people who can think differently, come from different angles. So I think some great people on the spectrum will help with a lot of the world's issues coming up. If they believe in themselves. if they don't feel like they've got nothing to offer, if they don't end up feeling like, I'm full. If you sense that, whatever you can do to bring them into this place of, there's a gift in this somewhere. I've done a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of personal growth work. And one thing I've learned is, for whatever reason, the universe, the creator, I use the word God because I don't have time to say primary facilitating mechanism of the universe. So God's a shortcut. But there's no time when the universe doesn't give us a big bag of poop, a big sack of manure, and there's not at least one, if not usually 2 or 3 gems in there somewhere. I consider FASD a huge bag of poop. And I know there are gems in there. And so far, again, I'm new at this. I've only been on the legal spectrum for almost 4 years now. But as I've dug into it, as much as I've dug into anything else in life, I've not found a gap in that logic. That every kid I've met, everybody I hear about, the stories I hear, they've got a little spark of something that just, it breaks your heart to see. It's so beautiful. How many people here are raising kids that you see this? You know, put up your hands if you've seen that spark in who you're dealing with. And it's just like, holy smokes. It's awesome. So that's the thing we all need to inspire out of these people. Us. It was really weird yesterday. I want to share this because this helps me clear my table a bit. It was really amazing listening to Jeff. And the thing that was so amazing was I heard so much they, them, you know, people on FSD. And I'm them. I'm them. And, you know, what's exciting for me, and I think this is also part of my message that I'm developing, is this does make me unique. And I'm no really different than any of you. I have no more value than you. I have no less value than you. And I got to tell everybody in the room, you have awesome value. You've got to own it. It's funny that way. But it is a superpower, and I guess coming back to finding those gems in the center of food, you know, that's really, I'm not a technician. Some of you people are really smart in this, and so I'm going to go to my last little thing I want to talk about, which is everybody in this room, if you got through the doorway, if you were able to drive a car or hail a cab or call a friend to get you here, you used your noggin. We've all got something happening above our chin. We all got some kind of brain, mind, whatever you want to call it. Pretty much most every human being that is alive and has survived for more than a month or two has got a brain. Some kind of thinking mechanism. You all may not agree in this next part, but most of us in this room have also done some thinking in their lives from the waist down, perhaps. Some say, I'm not saying it's true, but some say there are more than one brain in the head. And that's for the ladies as well as the men. So you can think from down here, you can think this way, and that will get you to a certain degree in life. Not always good places, and that's another lecture. This one. That's what I was talking about. But there's another place. It's in the middle between these two. We've all got a heart. I haven't yet met anybody so buried, and some of us can get pretty buried. I'm not saying it's deep, but we've all got a heart. We've got this other intelligence that isn't above the neck and it's not below the waist. And again, I don't want to get all spiritual because it isn't, to me, it's absolutely nothing to do with religion. It has to do with feelings, emotion. I call it my gut instinct. Some say that heart knowledge. So, as you go through helping these people on the spectrum, use your brain. Do not use what's below the waist. And absolutely develop what's in the middle. For yourself. You know, we're asking these young folks to do some pretty hard stuff to learn. You've got work to do too. If you don't know your own heart, if you're up here thinking you're noble and doing wonderful things, and it gets the job done, awesome. Keep doing that. But I'm here to tell you what saved me, why I am not a statistic. And there's been a few times I thought I might want to be a statistic. It wasn't fun. Why I'm not is because I got in touch with what's in between here. Because what that allowed me to do is feel other people caring for me. If you resonate this part and find your own heart in this, anybody in the FASD spectrum, this is like a flame, and they're like moths, and they're flopping around. We're trying to, but that is a flame that people cannot deny. So you may be trying to cognitively come in there and support them. Great, don't stop doing that. But just take on the idea when you leave today that you might be able to do a little bit different in a more expanded way. Because where you have gotten frustrated, and I can again speak from my experience, where my parents got frustrated with me, they were trying to control my brain. My brain didn't have the parts they were trying to control. Frustration land for both sides. But once I did that there, but I came home and locked the doors, that wasn't an intellectual conversation I had with my parents. There was crying. 5 boxes of Kleenex at least disappeared in about 12 hours. And it changed my life and it changed theirs. So, I'm just going to kind of summarize a bit. And I do appreciate your attention. I hope I haven't been talking too fast. A diagnosis, some people say, why bother? What good does it do? For me, it put me on a map that I could now navigate. I wasn't in some fantastical place like Hogwarts or Narnia. I knew where I was, and I could now do the work to get where I needed to go, where I wanted to go. As a young person, if I had gotten this diagnosis, I don't know if I could go back in time. I've been asked that a few times. If you could go back and tell your 13-year-old self, I don't know what I'd do. I don't have an answer for that. I might have turned out yet another entitled white male asshole. And you don't have to agree with me. I'm fed up with there's enough of them around. I didn't want to be that. So maybe this again is the way God decided to make sure I didn't go that route. But once I was ready for the diagnosis, and I took it on, and I think it allows me to stand here in front of you and speak my heart with only a bit of nervousness. Just making sure I haven't left out some really wonderful little thing. That's a really good point. So that's really the communicating from the heart to heart, developing that concept of actually an actual empathetic connection. Because you have to be brave to do it. You have to be brave to do it if you want them to be brave to do it. There's leadership in that. But the other thing I recommend, if you're a little bit, therapy or that kind of stuff is kind of weird for you, at least get curious. When you feel yourself getting frustrated, get curious instead. Try to take that frustration energy into curiosity. Truthfully, I wonder why they're behaving this way. What can I do? But from a place, again, it's weird. Curiosity from the head is like Spock. Like Jeff had yesterday, logical, I wonder what I can do for this. But when you can get it down into here and you have that same curiosity, I don't know why it happens, but answers that you did not even think of will come into your awareness. So, open-hearted curiosity. Be truthful. That's another point I'd bring up in this. Be truthful and be compassionate. And usually compassion before truth works. That's been my experience. Because usually if you tell the truth without compassion, they're not open for the compassion anymore. So put the compassion in the front of that. So I'll just really more than anything, what I want to do is leave you with that idea of heart. It's not oogie boogie, it's not all woo. There's an actual part in all of us that is smart. And here's the last thing I want to leave you with about that. This doesn't have FASD. The heart doesn't have mental disorder. Mental disease, mental disorder is mental. It's up here above the neck. This is a really, really powerful tool. When you are clean with it, it will guide you really well. It doesn't really get corrupted. Anytime you think you've got a corrupted heart, God bless you, literally. But that's your head that's corrupted. You are not corrupted. Your charges are not ever corrupted. They too have that purity. So don't lose sight of that. I hope some of this helps a little bit. We're going to have a question and answer period. That's my saving grace. So if you wonder what the heck I've been talking about, later on you can ask questions. And I'm excited to hear what you've got to say. Thank you for giving me this time.